If you love the idea of filling your house with flowers, flowers that you've grown yourself, but you wonder how on earth you can possibly have the time to do all of that, then this video is for you. Today I'm going to introduce you to my top 3 perennials that you can grow from seed that will fill your house with flower when others around are not in flower, and will do it year on year. So for the minimum effort, you can have flowers in your house consistently. Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm a gardener from Shropshire. I'm a gardener who loves flowers. I love growing flowers. And I love to grow the flowers so I can pick them and put them in my house. But I don't have all the time in the world, so I want to grow them with the minimum fuss, with the minimum time and effort to maximise efficiency and increase productivity. So if you're interested in that, then join me on my seed sowing adventures. This year is my second year of consciously growing seeds for my house. So not in the garden to enjoy, to be looked at, but to be brought into the house. And I have to say, it's been a year of ups and downs. I started off well. I had so many seedlings ready or virtually ready to go, and then unexpectedly I had to go away for 2 weeks, and my husband was left to water the seedlings, and we happened to have a heat wave, and of course by the time he remembered to do that, everything was dead. It was all too late, so I had to start again from scratch. So I have been trying to get back on top of that, or chasing my tail for the rest of the season, it seems. We are now the 10th of July, and I still haven't really got many of the annual seeds that I flowering. Yes, they're coming. In fact, I'm sitting here among some beautiful marigolds. I've got some straw flowers just about to come in. There are 2 scabiosas that I can see in flower, but 2 doesn't make a bouquet, does it? So I have been really struggling with the flowers that I've got through potentially no fault of my own, just life gets in the way. However, I have had vases of flowers in my house from my garden, and the reason I've had them is because of perennials that I sowed last year. And to be honest, some of them I didn't even know were perennials. It was just more luck than good judgment, but they have been fantastic. So my first one that I want to shout about is lupins. I've had lupins in my main garden for years. They've been there when I came, and they have continued to grow and bring me great joy. And that was, I thought they were perennial flowers, not something that you would think about growing from seed. However, I bought a seed because I was watching lots of flower farm videos, and they all have these lupins, and I'm thinking, well, they're growing them from seed, why can't I? So I gave it a try. And they grew, they germinated really easily. They grew well. I had a mixed seed collection, so I didn't know what colours were going to be. So I intentionally sowed more than I needed so that I could then, if the flower colour wasn't something that I wanted, I could then thin out. I sowed them possibly June last year. Can't remember exactly when I sowed them. There was no flowers last year. It was all about the plant development, which is fine. But this year, boy, they have been fantastic. Better than the lupins that I've had in the garden for years. They have had more flowers than those bigger plants. They have flowered earlier. They are continuing to flower now in July the 10th, when everything else has gone, they are continuing to flower. They are great. So I have a variety of colours. They provide a lovely spike in a flower arrangement, and they kind of have the quirkiness that I kind of like. I don't like anything too rigid, and they continue to grow in the vase. So they start a bit like tulips. They form these wacky shapes in a vase. So I think they're great. When you cut the first set of flowers, then you get a second flush, which is what I'm having at the moment. They're smaller, possibly easier to use. No, I wouldn't say that. They kind of blend in more into the arrangement. But it's a second flush, so I'm still getting flowers now. I really think they're fabulous, and they have been so easy to grow. So that would be my number one flower to grow. My second recommendation for growing a perennial seed or a perennial plant from seed, is Achilla. They come in a variety of colours, and again, this has been flowering non-stop since about May. I sowed it last year, again in my early spring sowings, and so I don't know, maybe May time, and it flowered last year. So it was later in the season, but it flowered last year. So I was able to use it last year. It dried well, so I was able to dry it and use it in some things that I made last year. And I moved it about, so I moved it into a better bed over in a perennial patch. Well, actually I've spread it about everywhere, but I've moved it around, and it has bloomed again easily and fabulously since June, and it's still going. It is probably getting to the end of the life that it is now, so I'm going to cut it all back and see if I get a second flush through after that. But it's been fantastic. It's brilliant as a filler in the bouquet arrangement, so you can really pad out your flowers with it. And as I say, it comes in a wide variety of colours. And again, I sowed a mix, I think it's called Colorado, although I could be wrong. And it's lots of pinky, peachy colours, so which I'm really pleased with, and they blend so well with all arrangements. So it goes from the pales. I'm pointing at this, which I don't believe was that. I think it was a wild one that I had in the garden already. But just behind, I don't know whether you can see, there is a pale cream colour going to bright raspberry pinks. So it's a fantastic range of colours in just that one set. And I haven't actually got that many plants, but they're just doing really well. You do need to stake them. So the lupins have fared reasonably well with the wind and the rain that we've had recently. They're still upright. Achilla, not so much. So you do need to make sure you get the staking in good and early so that they don't flop about everywhere. But for flowering potential, they are fabulous. And my third perennial that I couldn't have done without this year is Feverfew. I'm sitting amongst it as it flops everywhere. So again, another thing that needs staked, which I didn't do a very good job of. But it is brilliant. It is a clusters of daisy-like flowers. And again, this has been flowering in about the same time as the Feverfew, which is just behind here. My second batch or my other patch of Feverfew there. My other patch of Achilla. So it's been flowering similar sort of time. So I'm going to say it's been flowering from the start of June until now. This for definite, is certainly getting past its best. I'm going to have one good chop of it again to put in a selection of arrangements, and then cut it all down to pretty much base level, because where I have cut it previously I can see it growing up again. So I'm hopeful for a second flush of flowers later in the season, but it has flowered and flowered and flowered this, so it is brilliant. Now I don't want to say I have sown this from seed, although I kind of have. It has been in my garden for years, so all I have done with it this year was or last year perhaps, I corralled all of the odd plants that I had throughout the garden into one place. Strangely enough, there are still lots of plants out in the garden, so it self-seeds itself around the place easily, so there is no reason for me to believe that it would be a problem sowing specifically to grow. Without these 3 plants, I would have been pretty much lacking in any sort of arrangement. These have really been able to make my arrangements with the biennials, and that is another key plant. Whole other video which I will link in at the end of this video, but the biennials and these perennials have saved my flowering season so far. I'm only just getting flowers now, as I said, from all of the annuals that I've sown, so these have been saviours. So everything else is just starting to flourish, but these have been fantastic, and from now on I wouldn't be without them. And just as a bonus, a bonus flower for you to think about is geum. I bought a plant last year, so it was already sown for me, planted up. It has been fabulous this year, so, and again has flowered pretty much throughout June, July, and I can still see it flowering now. I sowed a different variety which was more peachy coloured, so that was a bright red and bright orange. I sowed a peachy coloured one, Mai Tai it was called, and I have several plants in the perennial bed cutting patch that I made. It flowered. It hasn't had much flower this year, and it's certainly stopped now, but if the more advanced plant, the orange one that I bought, is anything to go by, next year I'm hoping for those flowers to be fantastic. Now you couldn't make an arrangement with them. They add a airy, floaty feel to any arrangement that you may make, but you wouldn't make it, you couldn't just use them, so that's why it's a bonus as opposed to something substantial to use, because any of these you could put in a vase, any of the previous 3 you could have a vase of those and they would be lovely, but I wouldn't say that the geum by itself is anything too much to write home about. However, it adds something special if you want to create a little bit more quirkiness, a little bit more texture, a little bit more something else. They are fantastic to add in, and as I say, it's growing now and there's long airy strands of these flowers, but the seeds that I planted last year, they were just short, they didn't flower for very long, so I'm waiting for next year and hopefully we'll have a different story, but definitely worth something for you to try. So if I've inspired you to grow some perennial plants from seed, then here's a video that will get you through the basics. None of these perennial seeds needed any special care or attention. They were all in the ground by the autumn last year, so they only needed care for that growing season to get them established, and then they went in the ground and I have left them. So this video for sowing seed basics, and if you want something else that will get your season going sooner to go along with these perennials, then have a look at this video about biennials, because they have equally saved my flowering season this year. Until next time, happy growing!